Okay, so 4.7, this is getting into the extracellular. So extracellular, so the outer part of the cell. So, especially like with plant cells, talk a little bit about the cell wall. And then for all cells, but especially getting some details of the animal cells, how exactly do they connect with each other? If you have like a tissue layer, how do the cells in a tissue layer, like when you pull on your skin cells, why don't you just like rip off all of your cells? Like what anchors them together? And then within like a tissue layer, cells of the same type, how do they communicate with one another? Talk about that a little bit. That's what they mean by coordinating of activities. So yeah. Anyways, so I'll start showing you some of that. First thing is the cell wall. So you should have a pretty good idea what the cell wall is by now. Plant cells, fungi, prokaryotic cells, they're going to have those cell walls. It's outside of the actual cell. It's going to help. It gives that extra bit of protection and support that plant cells especially are going to need, and bacteria and fungi because they don't have a skeleton like we do. And it also prevents excess uptake of water. So I talked about this with like the central vacuole a couple sections ago, where by being able to like take in a plant being able to take in all of that water in its central vacuole, that can then that central vacuole can push against the cell wall. And I said it was like when two people go back to back and they stand up, the cell wall has this critical role in along with the central vacuole in giving that structure to a plant cell. Anyways, plant cell walls are made of cellulose. That's a fairly important detail. Also went over in Unit 1. Cellulose is one of those carbohydrates that's going to be really important. It's good. It's a good building carbohydrate. And that's also going to be embedded in like this matrix of polysaccharides and proteins. But the main kind of thing that's making up that cell wall is going to be cellulose. And some stuff that's probably a little new for you when it comes to the cell wall that you shouldn't have gotten into really in freshman bios. There's actually different layers of a cell wall. There's the primary cell wall. So this is when you're a newer plant. So, a freshly planted tree or something, or plant, will only have a primary cell wall. So all plants will have a primary cell wall. And this, because it's a newer cell wall, it's thinner and more flexible. Basically, if you're a newer plant and you're doing a lot of growing, you want to be more flexible, right? Especially if you need to, you're still trying to figure out and establish your space. You don't want to be as rigid and firm as like more mature plants. This is more mature plants will then get a secondary cell wall, mature, and not all plants. So that's why it's saying some cells, not all plants. Okay, and so this will be what kind of glues the primary cell wall and the secondary cell wall together is the middle lamella, and this will also be used to glue multiple cells together. So I'll show you a picture of all of this kind of in action, but let me hop to it. So. Here's a plant cell that would have both the primary and secondary cell wall. So the primary cell wall is actually on the very outer part. So it's a much thinner layer. So it's a darker brown right there. Then the reddish layer here, that's the oh wait, I'm sorry, I said it back. The reddish layer here, it still isn't as thick as the secondary cell wall. That's going to be your primary cell wall. And then if I want to glue, I said it wrong. The middle lamella isn't gluing the secondary and primary cell wall together. It's used just to glue two different cells together. So here's the middle lamella in brown. That's being used to glue the two primary cell walls of two connected plant cells together. And then the secondary cell wall, it's thicker, it's stronger, not as flexible. And notice how the secondary cell wall is the innermost cell wall. And the reason for that is if I'm a plant cell, so like here's a plant cell, it's more boxy, but okay, I'm gonna build my primary cell wall. If I'm gonna build it, I'm gonna have these like, these vacuoles that will, inside here, they're gonna have the different components that make up that cell wall. And so those vacuoles will add slowly all of the parts of that cell wall. Okay, cool. Well then, as that plant matures and it needs to make a secondary cell wall, because the parts that make up the secondary cell wall still come from these vacuoles, the secondary cell wall can't be added outside of the primary cell wall, because how would these vesicles get beyond the primary cell wall? They wouldn't be able to. They're gonna have to add that primary cell wall, or I'm sorry, the secondary cell wall in on the inside part of the primary cell wall. So that's why it seems a little backwards. You would think the primary cell wall would be first. You think the orange would be the primary cell wall and the red would be the secondary cell wall, but it's actually backwards, and that's just because that's just literally couldn't be built any other way. Okay, so that was kind of a standalone thing, a little more random. Getting into the extracellular matrix. So really the extracellular matrix is really more of a thing in animal cells. Plant cells technically do have an extracellular matrix, but animal cells can be a lot more elaborate because they don't have those cell walls. Meaning, animal cells, even though we do have a skeleton, we need to have something else that's going to give our cells even more support so that I can't just rip off my skin. ECM is how you'll see that abbreviated. So it's made up of glycoproteins. So here's some examples of glycoproteins like collagen, proteoglycans, fibronectin. Glyco is referring to carbohydrates. And protein is referring to protein. So they are proteins that have a bunch of carbohydrates attached to them. Collagen, you might have, you look at beauty products or something. Collagen can be a big that's the main fiber that when you see people as I'm getting older, you start seeing more wrinkles and stuff forming. What's causing those wrinkles is the breakdown of the collagen fibers in my skin. Whereas if you're younger, you have stronger collagen fibers that haven't broken down as much. So fun fact there. Proteoglycans, fibronectin, those would be some other examples of glycoproteins. Integrins, let me just hop to a picture to kind of explain these other parts here. So here's the collagen fiber. So this super thick fiber, that's the collagen fiber, really the main part of your extracellular matrix. And then you'll see all these, here's your proteoglycan. So this is, your glycoproteins that make this up here. So they have a core protein and then some carbohydrates attached to it. These can play a major role in signaling and cell recognition. Anyways, fibronectin and integrins. I really want to focus on these. So this is the integrin right here. And then this right here, this protein right there, that is the fibronectin. Okay, so let's start with the integrin. Integrin, it integrates the outside and the inside of the cell together. It connects the outside to the inside. So that's why it's called integrin. So this protein is going to span the entire cell membrane. Now fibronectin connects the integrin to the extracellular matrix. And this is pretty cool. So if I have this is where I was talking about where the extracellular matrix is also involved in communication. So think of it this way: if you, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you had a cup with a string, and then if you had a friend of yours across the room or something with another cup, and that same string attached to their cup, if I were to talk in that cup, that the sound waves can travel across that string, and then my friend could hold the cup up to their ear, and that sound wave would be passed from that string through the cup into their ear. In a similar way, if you have a tissue layer, a layer of cells of the same type, the extracellular matrix can act like that string, and how those cells in a tissue layer can communicate with each other and understand what's going on is through that extracellular matrix. which is kind of cool. So like imagine it could be like a vibration moving across this collagen fiber. It then passes from the collagen fiber through the fibronectin to the integrin, and then the integrin is connected to the cytoskeleton. So here are all the fibers of the cytoskeleton. Then that message can maybe communicate through the cytoskeleton, and then that could tell the cell, be one of the ways that a cell could then react to what's going on outside its environment. So I don't know, I think that's super cool, just that whole idea. But yeah, I think that's about everything here. Okay, so yeah, how do we, getting into, a key part of the extracellular matrix is making sure I can't just like rip my skin cells off, So how exactly do, what are the different junctions or connections that hold the extracellular matrix together? Well, there are 4 different kinds. Plasmodesmata, tight junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions. So plasmodesmata, when you see P, think plants. So really just the plants are going to have the plasmodesmata. And then I'll show you these, and these other 3 are really more for animals. Okay, so plasmodesmata, let me just get to a picture of it. So this is showing 2 plant cells that are adjacent or right next to each other. And basically the plasmodesmata allows these 2 plant cells to communicate with each other. So basically these 2 plant cells can share common cytoplasm. The cytoplasm of this plant cell can be in direct connection through the plasmodesmata. It's like a bridge between like 2 different cities or something. And so, maybe there are certain like water, smaller solutes, proteins, RNA, just different things that maybe 2 different plant cells want to share with each other. That would be the purpose there. So that's the plasmodesmata. All right, then in animal cells, they're going to have these 3, the tight junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions. All are really common in your epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is the tissue that's going to lines your skin, it lines your respiratory and digestive tract. And there's a real good reason for that. So let me just show you some of these examples here. There's a lot going on this slide. But let's just go through it one at a time. The first one is tight junctions. And when you see tight junctions, I want you to think watertight. Tight, watertight. So these are going to be, and they're shown right here. So these are, these protein fibers that will run through 2 different animal cells, connecting them together, like right there. And they're watertight, meaning water cannot pass through, it gets blocked. So you would see those, especially as I said, in your epithelial tissue cells. Like your skin's going to have those tight junctions, because if you didn't have those tight junctions, that's called a cut, right? Then like bacteria can get in there, and that's bad news. So that's why you're going to want good like tight junctions between your skin cells. Okay, then you have the desmosome. So the desmosome, it's sort of similar to a tight junction, but it's more of like a specialized tight junction. These are found in muscles. So muscles will especially have a lot of desmosomes. And I think they use the word rivet here. Like rivets. A rivet is like if you were to see like a steel door, like if you have like a steel door and you see like these things on it. Rivets, basically it's just a bolt type thing that can connect 2 things together. Like this could be like, like a rivet holding the cap and the actual marker together. I don't know. Just if you've never heard that word before, you could Google image search it and see what I'm talking about. All right, so how can you remember the desmosomes for muscles? So hang with me here. So not me, but like, there's kind of I've heard, if you're at the gym, sometimes you'll like, maybe get like some guys that are like, or gals, I suppose, that are like really getting into their workout, and it's maybe like a workout pair, like a buddy thing going on, and they're like trying to motivate each other, and they yell, get some, you know, like, get some, like Family Guy, Joe or whatever, muscles, gym, get some, I don't know. Or you could just memorize some other way. That's the best I got for you. All right, gap junctions. Gap junctions are completely different from tight junctions and desmosomes. Gap junctions, there is a gap, there's like a little hole that you see here. So if I was better at drawing, it's like a cylinder. I'm not even gonna try to draw, so it's a cylinder, a little hole. It's kind of like, it's similar to a plasmodesmata, but it's between these two animal cells, and it's only gonna let ions and small molecules. So really focusing on ions. So gap junctions can be really helpful in muscle contractions, where you need to, I mentioned how calcium is really important in muscle contractions. So you could have gap junctions that communicate those calcium ions between that entire muscle fiber. Okay. Yeah, also heart muscle can have a lot of gap junctions. Any sort of muscle. Okay, I know that's most of it. Let me see what else is in this section. Yeah, I mean, this slide is just, I've kind of sort of talked about this, just this idea that these different cell parts, like you can make flashcards memorizing the different parts of a cell, but really, especially for AP biology and the AP exam and stuff, you want to get this idea that the cell is greater than the sum of its parts. All these parts work together to make a cell function, and then the cell will they all function together in a tissue layer, and then different tissue layers work together in an organ, and then different organs work together in an organ system, and different organ systems work together to keep like an organism functioning healthily. So just trying to keep that bigger picture in mind whenever we're talking about the different organelles. So yeah, an example would be like a macrophage. In order to destroy a bacteria, it's got to utilize all those different cell parts. Okay? And there's a macrophage engulfing a bacteria, which is kind of wild. If you ever like look at like an animation or something of it, it's actually kind of wild. But yeah, so that's it for chapter 4. So there we go.